Hi, this is EdTV. Today we're going to try and dissect a 46-page long tedious report without boring you as quickly as we can. It's imperative that you understand the substance of this document, as it is one that is hugely backed by the Tory party. So under the direction of the Health Secretary, Mr Jeremy Hunt, Sir Robert Naylor has independently examined what could be done with surplus NHS property. This document was released on the 31st of March this year, and the main feature literally outlines the best way just to sell off NHS land. By selling off the NHS-owned land, it suggested that a backlog of necessary repairs and maintenance can be carried out to the remaining assets, the cost of which currently sits at an estimated amount of around £5 billion. The NHS currently does not have enough for what's called capital spending, which basically means paying for buildings and equipment, and is currently in a need of about £10 billion in order to carry out the 5-year forward view plan, which was put forward by the NHS leader, and it includes a backlog of maintenance and upgrades. The whole scandalous ordeal is connected to delivering billions of pounds worth of efficiency savings, all of which is completely opposed by the majority of the Labour Party. Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, John Ashworth, has actually said that under the Tories, hospitals are crumbling. And another MP from Labour has also commented that the Tory response is to now just sell off buildings and land with no explanation of when the NHS is actually going to see a piece of the proceeds. So what does the Naylor Report spell out for hospitals? Basically, you're required to cheaply sell off all your buildings and land, and if you don't comply with what's expected of you, then the government will pressurise you and deny you any cash and will slash all of your budgets until selling your assets is the only option. But to sweeten this deal, the government are going to throw in a nice 2-for-1 offer over a limited time period only though, to really encourage the urgent action and acceleration of the sale of the land, as well as the added pressure of there being a first come first served basis. So what this means is if the hospital acquire a sale, then the government will match the asking price so that the hospital appears to actually double its money. This is essentially an incentive to sell the land for so much less than it's actually worth, which is a terrible deal for the hospital itself, but if you're an investor, this is a fantastic deal. And at this point, it is worthwhile remembering who the Tories are aiming to please. Due to this huge sense of urgency, careful consideration and planning is just a luxury that hospitals do not have. And what with hospitals being hit so hard financially, this is seeming to be the most fast and effective method for releasing desperately needed funds. The majority of NHS land is actually owned by local trusts who are charged 3.5% annually on the value of their land. The Naylor Report recommends blocking trusts from being permitted to receive any assigned capital funding from the government unless they commit to selling off the land. There's a really macabre plan being executed right now. There have already been so many hospital closures, with a further 60 more NHS trusts facing either a downgrade, merger or closure. Plans to reduce A&Es down to between 40 and 70 units. The bed numbers have already decreased by half since the 80s anyway. And what with efficiency savings for 2020, the amount of cuts to the NHS will be at £40 billion by the end of this decade. This year alone, the British Red Cross declared the UK health service to be under a humanitarian crisis. Hundreds of GP surgeries have closed since 2010, and it said that 600 more are going to close before 2020. And the aim is to reduce surgeries from 7,500 down to 1,500. Gone are the days of the family doctor in favour of a new, lucrative corporate care. The goal is just to shrink the public NHS and maximise private infrastructure. The mainstream media is completely awash with this stupid smokescreen that suggests that care is going to be delivered in the community. But what does that even mean? It doesn't take a genius to work out that this will not work, especially with an ever-growing population, regardless entirely of what Brexit brings us. But what people don't understand is that the NHS model itself, honestly speaking, is cost efficient. But when the mainstream media focuses on unsustainable costs due to expensive new treatments and our ever-ageing population, then the demise of the NHS does start to seem plausible, as does this supposed health tourism, which is equal to only 0.3% of the budget, when what we should be thinking about is the £300 billion of UK private finance initiative debt being siphoned off to banks and corporates. This information isn't anything that's hidden. It's all there if you take the time to sift through arduous, boring reports such as the Naylor Report, But many still depend on the likes of the BBC to deliver them truth about what's happening in their own countries and the decisions that the government is now making and how it affects the rest of their lives. On a side note, in 2013, Tories did abolish primary care trusts. These trusts were responsible for commissioning primary, community and secondary health services from providers. And all of that was just scrapped and the assets were freely just handed over to NHS Property Services, which was a government-owned private company. NHS PS is managed by a man whose name is Simon Stevens. He's apparently a health expert when you look him up. Not only that, but he is actually the head of United Health. And if you look them up, this company appears on the Forbes list of richest corporations in the US, and it's in fact the 6th largest corporation in the United States. This Mr. Stevens was actually the guru of privatization in the noughties before he went on to become executive of United Health. He's even been offered a top position in our NHS by David Cameron during the last Parliament. Theresa May is still yet to rule out the NHS as part of a free trade deal with the US. And we also have Jeremy Hunt insisting that the US and the UK health sectors should collaborate. But it does sound as though this may have already started. You might hear people discussing the privatisation of the NHS, but the government won't expect you to go and do the legwork to actually truly understand what their actual plans are. I also believe that they rely on the fact that the plans are so terrible that if they do surface, then no one's actually going to believe it. Have a look for yourself, read the Naylor Report, or look up the likes of Simon Stevens. It's all online. It's just nowhere near the pages or screens of the mainstream media. Thank you.